Have you ever lain awake, the silence pressing down, certain something unseen is lurking just out of sight? 5 of the creepiest true horror stories ever unearthed are about to unfold. Tales so real, so terrifying, you'll need someone to hold your hand through the dark. These aren't just stories, they're scars on the souls of those who lived them, and they might just find a home in your nightmares. If you've ever felt that cold dread when you're alone, this is your warning. Stay with me, but act fast. Once you start, there's no escaping the end. Let's begin. Long before those 2 brothers dared to wander into the Pine Barrens, the forest had a reputation that kept most locals at bay. Tales told of people who entered the woods seeking adventure, only to vanish without a trace or return changed, speaking of voices that didn't belong to any living creature. Some said the forest itself was alive, watching, waiting, hungry for the souls of the careless. The brothers laughed at such stories, their youthful bravado blinding them to the warnings etched in the cracked bark of ancient trees. On that cold October evening, as they walked deeper, the dense fog thickened unnaturally, swallowing the light from their flashlights. Every step seemed to echo in a stillness that pressed against their eardrums. The 2 brothers moved cautiously, their breath visible in the cold air as skeletal, twisted trees loomed above them, branches snapping underfoot. The thick mist swirled around their feet, faint glowing whispers weaving through the fog like ghostly melodies. When the whispering began, it was as if the very air shifted, carrying voices layered like a haunting melody, impossibly close, yet just out of reach. The younger brother's skin prickled, and he sensed eyes burning into him from the shadows. Tall, shadowy figures with glowing, ember-like eyes peeked between tree trunks, their limbs bent unnaturally, watching silently. The forest was no longer just trees and mist. It was something else entirely, something that had been waiting for them. They reached a small clearing surrounded by towering pines, where the ground was littered with bones, animal, perhaps human, too aged to tell. An eerie stillness clung to the space, and in its center, a crooked wooden totem stood impaled in the dirt, wrapped in strips of rotting fabric. Neither dared to speak as they stepped around it, but the wind howled suddenly, and the fabric fluttered, revealing symbols carved in a language that hurt to look at. As dusk bled into darkness, the forest around them shifted. The usual night sounds faded into a strange, unnatural silence. The trees pressed in close, almost breathing, and the air grew heavy. They made camp beside a dying fire, flickering weakly in the dark woods. Shadows danced eerily on the tree's bark. That's when the whispering began. At first it was faint, like leaves brushing together in the cold wind, then clearer, distinct, voices weaving through the fog, murmuring secrets. One of them whispered the younger brother's name, over and over. He froze, pale, fixated on the dark beyond the firelight. His older brother waved it off as wind, but deep inside, he felt something watching. The younger one wandered away from the firelight, as if drawn by the voices. His flashlight flickered, then died, leaving him alone in near-complete darkness. Behind him, something stepped, slow, deliberate. When he turned, he saw nothing but fog until a shape lunged through it, a blur, not beast, not man. As the fire dimmed, figures moved between the trees, tall, shadow-like, their limbs wrong, bending at impossible angles. The brothers stood, paralyzed, as a cold breath of wind carried the voices closer, laughing, pleading, screaming. Suddenly, the fire burst upward in a violent flare, and just as fast extinguished. Panicking, they ran, blindly through the trees, branches snapping, roots grabbing their ankles. The mist clung thick and ghostly as they fled. But somehow, they made it out, or so they thought. That night, as they reached the outskirts of town, they realized the fog had followed them. It clung low to the ground, tendrils curling at their heels. Lights flickered in nearby homes, Even the stars seemed dimmer. The older brother looked back just once and swore he saw a figure standing at the tree line, still watching, still waiting. Days passed, and the younger brother changed. He no longer slept. He no longer spoke of what he heard in the trees. Sometimes he stood at the edge of the woods whispering to someone, something. He started drawing the totem they'd seen again and again in notebooks, on the walls, even carved into his desk. No one ever followed the voices again. Not after what happened to him. For years, the bus stop had been a spot locals avoided late at night, speaking in hushed tones of a woman who appeared and disappeared like a shadow. Stories passed down told of her tragic death decades ago, waiting for a bus that never came. Those who claimed to see her said the air turned icy cold, and an oppressive silence swallowed the world around her. It was just past 2 a.m. when a tired janitor waited alone at a bus stop on the outskirts of a dying industrial town. Fog clung to the broken pavement. The streetlights above flickered like they were struggling to stay awake. He'd missed the last bus, or so he thought. Across the street, a woman appeared, standing perfectly still in a long, moth-eaten coat. Her hair covered her face. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stood beneath the flickering light. Something about her felt wrong. He looked away for a moment, and when he looked back, she was gone. Startled, he turned his head, only to find her now standing behind him. Closer, still, silent. His breath caught in his throat. No footsteps, no sound, just presence. He backed away, heart pounding, but she didn't follow. She just stared. When his phone buzzed, he grabbed it, only to find the screen black, the battery dead. That's when she whispered, right in his ear, "It's not the last bus. It's the last stop." He turned and ran. The next morning, a passerby found his phone sitting on the bench. It was cracked, covered in condensation. One photo had been taken during the night. It showed the woman's face, white as ash, lips stretched unnaturally wide in a grin, and no eyes, just black, gaping holes. The janitor never returned to work. Rumors say he left town, convinced she was following him. Others say he was never seen again. Not really. Only glimpsed, reflected in puddles, or standing at distant bus stops, watching. That night, long after the janitor fled, strange flickering shadows danced on the walls of the bus shelter, twisting and warping as if something unseen was trapped there. The faint hum of distant whispers echoed through the empty streets, barely audible, but unmistakably real. Locals say the bus stop bench sometimes holds the imprint of cold hands, and puddles reflect faces that aren't there. Streetlights flicker more violently, casting distorted shadows that stretch unnaturally. After inheriting his grandmother's crumbling farmhouse, a man named Caleb moved in to clear it out and prepare it for sale. The house was old. Floorboards groaned, wallpaper peeled like dried skin. But the attic had always been sealed shut until now. Behind dusty boxes and moth-eaten trunks, Caleb found something curious. An antique mirror, 7 feet tall, framed in ornate iron, with a crack running down its center like a scar. It leaned against the far wall, draped in a thick black cloth. When he removed it, the room grew colder. He stared into the glass, and his reflection stared back. But something was wrong. The eyes were empty, not his, not anyone's. He turned away, unsettled. That night he dreamed of the attic. In the dream, someone stood behind him in the mirror, reaching out with gray, veined hands. He began seeing movement in the glass. Just beyond his reflection, a flicker of motion, like someone else was in the room. Faces would appear and vanish. Sometimes he saw his grandmother, mouth open in silent warning. Once, he saw himself, older, decomposed. He tried covering it again. But every morning, the cloth would be on the floor, neatly folded. He nailed the attic door shut. It creaked open on its own. He even left the house. But when he returned, the mirror had moved, closer to the stairs, waiting. One chilling night, as moonlight filtered weakly through the attic window, faint shadows flickered just beyond the mirror's surface. A cold breath brushed Caleb's neck as whispering voices seemed to swirl within the glass, calling his name softly. The broken shards of the shattered mirror on the floor reflected eerie, distorted faces, twisting and melting into one another like a waking nightmare. Digging through his grandmother's journals, he found a chilling note. The mirror isn't cursed. It's hungry. She spoke of a spirit sealed inside during a seance gone wrong, bound to reflect only what it had taken and what it wanted next. One night, Caleb smashed it, shards flying everywhere. But instead of his reflection in each broken piece, he saw something else, something watching him. And now, even without the mirror, he can still see his own face, smiling when he closes his eyes. Driving down an empty rural highway in a thunderstorm, a man spotted a figure on the roadside. A hitchhiker, soaked, shivering, hand raised. Against his better judgment, the driver pulled over. The man slid into the passenger seat and whispered one thing: "They're coming. Don't look back." The driver, confused, tried to ask questions, but the man wouldn't speak again. His face was pale, almost grey. His fingers trembled. Minutes passed in silence until the lights appeared behind them. Dozens of flickering, unnatural lights, rushing forward, zigzagging like fireflies caught in a storm. The driver's heart raced. "What are those?" he asked. The hitchhiker turned, eyes wide with terror. "Drive," he said, "now." As they sped through the night, the lights grew closer, bright, erratic, pulsing like heartbeats. Then, a high-pitched whine, like static, and the hitchhiker was gone, just like that. The seat beside him was empty. The door hadn't opened. There was no sign of exit. The next morning, the driver pulled over near where he'd picked the man up. There, hanging from a fence post, was an old trench coat. In its pocket, a black and white photo of a family from the 1940s. In the center, the hitchhiker, younger, but unmistakable. Later that week, the driver began receiving calls, always at 12:14 a.m., no voice, just the faint sound of rain and tires screeching. One foggy dawn, the highway lay silent, the road slick with rain. Above the trees, ethereal flickering lights hovered, casting an unearthly glow. A lone figure stood watching from the shadows, terrified eyes wide, rain dripping down his pale face. Locals say the highway is cursed, that during a government experiment gone wrong, a convoy disappeared into a rift. The hitchhiker, a survivor, trapped between timelines, always running, always warning the next poor soul who stops. In a forgotten corner of town, nestled between two abandoned buildings, stood a little antique shop. Its windows were fogged, its sign unreadable. But inside, time ticked. 100 clocks, all synchronized, filled the air with a slow, mechanical heartbeat. A man named Julian entered one rainy afternoon, drawn by the sound. The shopkeeper, a frail man with deep eye sockets, pointed silently to a small silver pocket watch behind the counter. Its hands were frozen at 3:33. "Don't wind it," the old man said. "Not unless you're ready." Julian did. The instant he turned the key, the shop went silent. When he got home, every clock in his apartment, working or not, ticked in unison. At 3:33 a.m., they all rang out at once. And from then on, the ticking never stopped. It came from the walls, the pipes, his chest. Every heartbeat echoed like gears grinding. And in mirrors, he began to see something behind him, a figure in a long coat, face covered in brass cogs and dials, eyes spinning like clock hands. He tried smashing the clocks. They returned. Every day, back in place. Tick, tick, tick. He returned to the shop. but it was gone, as if it had never existed. One night, the clocks all began ticking in perfect unison, the sound echoing like a heartbeat in an empty cathedral. A shadowy figure with a face made of clockwork parts stood motionless in the doorway, glowing eyes locked on Julian. The air grew thick with the scent of old wood and oil. Desperate, Julian sought help from a historian who uncovered a tale of a 19th century clockmaker obsessed with cheating death. They said he bound his soul into a timepiece, promising to return when it was wound. That watch? It was the key. Julian vanished months later. His apartment was empty, except for one thing: the pocket watch. Still ticking, still at 3:33. There it is. 5 stories etched in the dark corners of reality, each one a shiver you can't shake off. Did you feel that prickle on your neck? That urge to check the shadows? These aren't just tales. They're echoes of lives touched by the unknown, and maybe, just maybe, they found you too. I've bared these secrets, but now it's your turn. Do you believe this really happened? Have you ever brushed against something that made your soul tremble? If this gripped you, it's because it was meant to reach you. Subscribe to the channel, but only if you dare to face what waits in the dark.